Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. Remember to subscribe to our free podcast so you won't miss any of our inspiring content. Here is episode 136.
And what I mean by resourceful is that they know what they know. They know a lot of what they don't know, and then I want them to be able to use those to leverage to get what they want.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Well, welcome, Jason, to The Luminous Mind.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for reaching out.
Well, I'm really excited to hear more about your story. I was telling Jason before we started recording that he's living the life that my husband and I wish we could live. So go ahead and tell our audience, though, a little bit more about yourself, kind of your family and hobbies, and then your profession.
Okay. Well, my name is Jason Jenkins. I'm an American. I'm from the Atlanta area. I grew up in several places in and around Atlanta. I have my wife, Keiko, and I have a 13-year-old son and a soon-to-be 10-year-old daughter. We lived in Japan for about 13 years, from 2001 to 2013. Well, maybe I should say I left the States around 1997, and I've been living abroad since then. My kids were born and raised in Japan, and then in 2013, my wife and I left our desk jobs in Tokyo and pulled the kids out of school and started sort of traveling full time. But when I say traveling, sort of slow traveling, we move to a place, we stay for a while, and then we move on. As far as hobbies, I'm a big photography shutterbug. I love photography. I love to look at photography. I love to take pictures. Obviously, travel is a big part of it. I love museums and art. I've done a bit of art criticism and ran a small contemporary art fair in Japan a long time ago. Music, live music. As far as the passions of the family, my son is a bit of a footballer, or soccer for my countrymen, and that's one of the reasons we're in Spain now, so that he can kind of play with people who take it seriously. And my daughter is really into the arts. She plays guitar. She loves art and theater, so we try to incorporate those things into her life.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, tell us a little bit more about that story and your journey that led you to discover what you love to do, what you're doing now.
Okay, let's see. Well, obviously, I would definitely say that I am still on that journey and sort of kind of figuring out where that journey will take me next.
But it is a pretty intriguing story how you...
Sure.
I would love to hear, Jason is a professional teacher, correct? I mean, that's what you have your degree in.
Well, actually, yes. I was a school teacher in the States. I graduated college and taught elementary school in the United States for 3 years. I chose to teach in some challenging neighborhoods. I wanted to be that guy that made a difference. I wanted to be the hero, I guess. And there are people that are doing that every day in the States and in many other countries, and I admire them for that. But I quickly realized that I wasn't built for it. I don't know, psychologically, emotionally. Within the halfway through the second year, I realized that I didn't think I was going to be able to take it. Just the sort of pressure of the place I was in, kind of situations I was dealing with the school system and the administration and all of those things. That's a story in itself. But I was
going to say it probably wasn't the children, right? It was more of trying to work within that system, trying to make changes.
Well, I chose to work with tough kids, and I realized that I didn't think I was going to be able to make it 4 years into retirement, even though I wanted to be there, and I admire the people who were able to do that. So I needed to take a break, and by the third year, I realized, okay, the next year I'm going to take a break, and so I decided I was going to go teach English abroad for a year. This is pre-internet for you youngins out there. This was 1997. I didn't even have an email address at that time, and I had heard that people taught English abroad, and I kind of did some research, mailed some people back and forth. Through a system of coincidences, ended up going to Taiwan, and it was supposed to just be for a year. I was going to go for a year, sort of recharge my batteries, and then come back. And I never came back. I lived in Taiwan for about 3.5 years, and then moved to Japan and was there until 2013 when we sort of left and wandered around Southeast Asia for a while. I moved to Japan as an English teacher. I taught English in Taiwan, and then I taught English for about a year when I got to Tokyo. But wanted a change and just hustled and had a couple good breaks and ended up writing for a newspaper there, and then got a job at an ad agency and was working just as a copywriter at an ad agency, just editing camera brochures, those kinds of things. And I stayed at that job for the whole time I was there, and still work for them today. I basically pitched working remotely, which is a whole other story. I sort of convinced my bosses that I could do the job anywhere, because most of the work is online. It's Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint. And that's what happened. We left in September of 2013 and have been sort of digitally homeless since then.
Well, that's awesome. What's the story behind the EPIC education, kind of wanting to maybe use travel as a way of teaching children or your own children? Dive into your family life of how you wanted those dynamics to change.
Sure. Well, the blog and Epic Education, I chose the name and have been sort of mulling it over lately because I'm doing a little bit of an overhaul with it. But so I've been thinking about it a lot. I chose the name Epic Education, epic, I guess, because it's the word the young kids now use for cool. but also the true meaning of epic, in that a long and arduous heroic story that goes through many phases. And I felt that was something that was happening with us. The education was not just for my children; it was for us as a family, for myself. And also, education was just a big part of it. My kids were in public schools in Japan. The government-run daycare system in Japan is fantastic. The elementary school system there is fantastic. I think it's exceptional in many, many ways. But when it gets to junior high school and high school, which my son was approaching, it becomes a lot more about testing. I'm sure that some of your guests and you have had these conversations about the testing culture that is going on in the States and in many countries, where it's a lot less critical thinking, it's a lot more memorization. And so I wasn't sure if I wanted my kids to go in that direction. And my wife and I have been talking about, doing some serious family travel, maybe when the kids get older, when they graduate. Well, my son graduates from high school, say. But we realized as junior high school was approaching, and just a variety of things that were happening in our life and the kind of way we were seeing our kids growing up, just as far as just assimilation and sort of not really being their own kind of individual self, we realized we needed, or at least we wanted them to see more of the world sooner than later. So
there's a lot to learn from that, right?
Indeed. And so that's sort of where the blog started. I had already kind of planned to leave, had set myself up to leave. Part of that was to kind of show the kids more of the world, also to get them speaking English. Their first language is Japanese. We lived in a Japanese neighborhood, in a Japanese school with Japanese friends and Japanese teachers and so on and so on. We also, for all the reasons that you have probably thought about, is, as far as, homeschooling and unschooling, we wanted to experiment with these. We wanted to see what a life of travel could teach us. And obviously, when you're traveling like that, we live in a great time to do this with the web and tablets and laptops. And so we tried to incorporate as many tools that were useful and try to weed out was just clutter and distraction. And we're still obviously still working on that. But the whole idea was to use travel and technology as teachers for the kids, for us. That has been an evolving process for the last 3 years.
Well, and to maybe reconnect your family, I mean, did you feel some distance as I was reading your About tab on your website? There was definitely that desire to want to try to reconnect, with the family, not to feel so rushed and all of that as well.
Oh, absolutely, Rebecca. That was a major component as well, because my wife was working for a bank. I was working at an ad agency. Our schedules were very full. The four of us were rarely in the house at the same time when we weren't asleep. So we joked that we called ourselves tag team single parents, because one night I would leave work, pick up the kids, cook dinner for them, hurry them through dinner, hurry them through their homework, hurry them through their shower, and hurry them to bed. And then about 11 o'clock, Keiko would come home from work, and then we would just flip roles the next day. Fortunately, we had my in-laws in Osaka, so that if I had a business trip or she had a late meeting or we both had a meeting, we would, fork out $150 for my mother-in-law to take a bullet train up to just babysit the kids overnight. And we just weren't together. We weren't spending a lot of time. And even on the weekends, my son had, soccer practice in this direction. My daughter had a gymnastics, club in the other direction. And so we weren't spending any time together. And there was another element of cultural identity. My kids were growing up. We lived in a very nice, a nice working class, Tokyo suburb. Everybody was great to us and very nice, but we were a little different. And it was, my kids felt that. They felt that they were sort of outsiders. Not that we were ostracized. If anything, we were treated better, but my kids were treated as welcome guests in their own neighborhood, which they considered home. And I felt like there was something to that they kind of needed to see, that there was a bigger world out there, that they're not an outsider, that this is just one place in the world. And so I wanted to go show them some of that, and that's what we did.
That's awesome. So what were some of the challenges that you maybe had setting this up, of a life of travel and being able to, work remotely and being together as a family?
Well, those challenges are ongoing, but I would say the major ones are just time management. I mean, obviously, money as well. I took a huge pay cut to do this. And so we've had to kind of manage our money well, because we do move around a lot. And you will hear people talk about that a life of travel is cheaper than having a mortgage and a car payment and insurance and all that. And that can be true. But if you want to see a lot of the world and you're buying, 4 plane tickets and, staying in hotels or guest houses, you're still spending money. So you have to be careful. So money's a challenge. The biggest challenge for me is been time management, because I'm trying to work a full-time job and also suddenly become a full-time teacher again.
And then an expat. I mean, whenever you're moving around, a day of moving is definitely difficult.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. We thought that we were slow traveling when we were staying in one place for 2 months and then moving on, when, to be honest, that 2 months was too fast for us. Because by the time you get kind of settled in and into patterns, and I have to have Skype set up, I have to make sure that each place has high-speed Wi-Fi so that I can meet with my clients and my bosses and those kinds of things. But then at the same time, the one thing that I really, really underestimated, and I think this is what you're asking here when you're talking about challenges, I really underestimated the amount of time that it would take to work a full-time job and also be a full-time teacher to both of my kids. It's a big challenge, and a lot of people don't talk about that. And it's completely possible, but you really, really, whatever amount of time you think you need, you're going to need probably double that. I thought, because I was that I was a school teacher, and my wife at one point was actually a school teacher as well. I think we just sort of thought, well, we've been there, done that. How we can do this. But kids do need guidance, you do need time. And it doesn't matter if you're doing conventional school at home, meaning that you have set periods and lessons and worksheets, which we tried, or if you're doing full-on unschooling where the kid guides themselves and they kind of do what they want, which we've done that as well. The kids need your presence. And if you're locked in a room trying to finish for a deadline in 3 hours, you're not present. I was not present. And that was a real challenge for us. So I guess that's the biggest thing, was trying to figure out how to manage my work and my attention. I have a bit of attention deficit, whatever, and so trying to be able to focus and knock out my work and then be there for the kids when they needed me has been the biggest challenge for sure.
Well, when you're your children's teacher, especially since you're working a full-time job on top of that, that's very, I don't know, you're just all about everybody else. And when you don't take care of or feed yourself, have you had any challenges like that where just being able to take care of yourself has been put on the back burner? Do you know what I mean? With your own learning, we all have a desire to try to increase our abilities and all of those things, even as adults.
Oh, absolutely, Rebecca. I mean,
time away is really important, correct?
Time away, just time. I mean, I watch movies with the kids, but as far as sort of personal entertainment sort of taken the wayside, I have about 15 Udemy classes that I've paid for and are sitting in a deck that I want to learn. I have Spanish lessons. I've been living in Spain for 6 months and still don't speak very much Spanish because all of the other things that I'm juggling are a higher priority. We could talk a little about that too. I mean, the kids are close to fluent now, shockingly, but my wife and I can barely mumble a sentence right now because of just trying to manage all the other things that we're doing. But I mean, that's okay. That goes with the territory. But it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, including myself, look at this sort of fantasy of that you're going to be able to knock all these things out. And there's a bit of a success bias when we listen to podcasts like yours, listen to podcasts like mine, look at different blogs, and we see people succeeding. And a lot of times the trials aren't shown. And, and the thing is, you just need to recognize that and be able to hunker down and do what's the most important thing.
Yeah, that we make it look effortless when there's a whole lot of struggle involved. So that's great. So tell me maybe some things that you've learned from those challenges that you've had.
Okay, what have I learned? Well, a lot of these things are going to seem maybe obvious or even trite, but I think they're important to know. I've learned a lot about my family's emotional cues and body cues. I felt like I knew when we left a few years ago. I thought I knew when my kids were happy and content and when they were upset and sad. And, just like every relationship, you have to keep a certain sense of presence and awareness to kind of see when the kids when they really are enjoying where they are or enjoying what they're doing. We had a case of that, a couple of years ago where when I realized that I thought they weren't happy in this certain situation that they were in this certain class or this certain location, and they were like, "No, I love it." And then the opposite has happened where I thought you guys liked it here. And they're like, "No, we're ready to move on." So I think just not being hypersensitive, but the challenge of just, kind of making sure everybody's happy. Because if people aren't happy, then it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
It's not worth going through all of this for some adventure if nobody's happy. One of the biggest challenges has been that. I think another big challenge without, how do I say this diplomatically? When children arrive at puberty and you're moving around, puberty is a challenge wherever you are.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, it is.
As you may have heard from other traveling families, basically a lot of traveling families, when they move around, when you've got a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old, you can throw a dozen 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds on a beach, and it doesn't matter what language they speak, what color they are, what culture they come from, but they're going to play.
Yeah, and have a great day. Yeah. And
they're going to have a great day. But as they get older, kids become more selective of, they have their own tastes and their own predilections. As our kids have gotten older, they've wanted to have their own clique and their own crew. And that's one of the reasons that we have sort of settled here in Spain for a while, because they wanted to have some sort of consistency and stay in one place and kind of enjoy it. And we've lucked out. We're in Valencia, Spain now, and they absolutely love it. And they have a big group of friends, and they get to go out and enjoy themselves. My son's on a great soccer team here. He meets his friends out. That's another great thing about Spain right now, is that my 13-year-old son can go out at 6 o'clock at night and stay out for 3 or 4 hours in the city, and I don't worry about him at all. So he'll come home for dinner in a little while after playing with his friends, and we've enjoyed that. Have I answered your question? The challenges have been, it's been more of just making sure that everybody's needs are met and that I'm still able to accomplish the work that I need to do to get paid.
Well, and it sounds like what I'm getting from what you learned, and then maybe you can correct me and try to clarify it a little better, but even though you've had a lot of struggles and challenges, probably getting to know your family a little bit better with their emotions and all of those type of things, that because you've had those challenges, do you feel like maybe it's helped you understand each other better? And maybe, too, where you're moving around and you're having to adjust and accommodate, that maybe you're learning more about yourself as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's been a crucial element, is that, I keep talking about the challenge of doing these things. It's not because it's difficult. It's that it's such different. It's a deep well that you have to continue to go deeper into. I knew and loved and understood my kids, and they knew and loved and understood me to a certain extent 3 years ago. But that our level of understanding now is much deeper, and we're so much closer now. I'm not saying that we're all lovey-dovey and that we don't argue or fight or any time. I mean, that happens all the time. But I feel a much deeper connection with my kids. I feel like they understand me to a certain level, because we spend, for the last 3 years, before we came to Spain, I should say, we were together, 24 hours a day, basically. The kids didn't go to, they went to computer lessons or guitar lessons here or there when we were in different cities, but they didn't go to school. They stayed at home. I worked, and we ate in the house, or we were maybe, on 2 different motorcycles wandering around Indonesia, say. In those kind of situations, you learn a small little tick of the eye or a certain cock of the head means this or that. And I think we certainly learned each other to a certain extent. But I feel like this sounds trite as well. But, kids are often just a mirror of yourself, right? Yeah. That's a big thing that I've been learning, is that some of the things that drive me absolutely crazy about my son are things that are deep within me, or certain things that that we get on to my daughter about, or that we praise her for. There are certain elements of me or my wife. And so any time that I'm ready to lose it with them, I sometimes have to take a deep breath and think, all right, where is your connection to this? And it's rare. It happens, but it's rare that I can't find a certain connection to my own personality or to my wife's. And so that makes it more relatable, right? It makes us realize where it comes from. And, then we have to have those kind of conversations with them, that we have that element in us too. And that we have to show that sort of empathy.
Yeah. So challenges create depth in relationships.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Great. So tell me, how do you feel like going back from being the beginning school teaching time to now, how do you feel like your paradigm has changed over that time and with that experience on, it could be a number of things, but education, how much the travel has helped, those types of things?
Well, Rebecca, this has been on my mind a lot lately, and when I knew this interview was coming up, I was thinking about it as well. I would say that my paradigm, to use
my terminology,
your website, your terminology, but the paradigm has changed several times over, and I think this would probably sort of fit into the sort of advice that you were asking about as well. Paradigm has changed several times, and I have to realize that I need to keep myself open to things that I might not expect. And let me explain that a little bit. When we left in 2013, we went from conventional school to homeschool, and we tried basically doing conventional school at home. And then we tried every variation, or I should say several variations between conventional school and unschooling for 3 years. Road schooling, world schooling, whatever you want to call it. We were basically using the internet and airlines to take us to different places to study the history in, say, Vietnam or in Malaysia or in Thailand. And we were learning quite a bit. And so I went from this sort of, we have to have these sort of regulations or sort of a routine, to we're going to leave it open and we're going to let them sort of discover it on their own. And then we've kind of gone back to routine. So I guess what I'd like to say is that the paradigm changes, and the paradigm is different for everybody.
Yeah.
There is no one-size-fits-all solution for families, for happy families or for happy kids in education. We've met some stellar unschooled kids, the kind of kids that you look at and you say, those kids they're gonna rule the world someday. I'm gonna read about you later. And I've met some other unschooled kids that were self-involved, kids that just were just the
values were not there or something.
Right. Well, there's a difference between unschooling and allowing the kid to think everything he does is right. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I've seen both. I've seen kids that thrived in conventional schools, and I've seen kids that were miserable and needed out of there. I've realized that my kids and most kids, each has their own different learning styles. As I don't think we've talked about this, but when we came to Spain, we put our kids in school here. They're in local schools. They were homeschooled by us for about 2.5 years. And then when we arrived here, we put them into local schools where all of their classes are in Spanish or in Valenciano, which is the local language in Valencia, Spain, where we are. We didn't speak any Spanish when we got here, and like I told you, my wife and I still don't very well. I mean, we're struggling. But we put our kids into conventional schools here, but mainly so that they'd be able to learn Spanish faster and they would make friends.
Assimilate
that's what they
into
want.
the culture maybe a little
Exactly.
faster.
They're thriving in it. They love it. And I mean, we're talking about kids that are taking, math exams and science exams and history exams in Spanish. I mean, like my son's science class and my daughter's history class is in Valenciano, a language they don't even speak. And they're doing well. We told them when they arrived, if you flunk out, it's okay. We don't care. The grades are not the important thing. The important thing is that you make some friends and the experience. But they're not. They have B- C averages right now, which is shocking to me. But to get back to your question is that, I just have had to learn to change my expectations or have none. I would have never guessed that my kids wanted and would have enjoyed this sort of conventional, and it's the same kind of testing culture as they had in Japan, but they like it. My son didn't like homeschooling because he said he likes having tests and having deadlines. Do you know what I mean? With unschooling, there was never, and this is maybe a testament to our teaching style, and maybe we should have changed that, but we didn't give him enough pressure. We didn't give him enough. He needed to know that by this time he was going to be graded. He feels satisfaction from knowing that he has a test on Friday and he aces it, and he goes in and he aces it in Spanish.
And maybe the education not only changes for each child, but maybe their placement too. I've seen where sometimes they kind of need their space to figure out what they want, and then once they find that direction, giving them the structure to go around it. I mean,
right.
just
It's
looking at my
possible
own
that
self, maybe. Go ahead.
Right. Well, it's possible that I'm talking too much about myself and the kids, but to answer your question is that at first I thought this was the only way, this was the best way, and then I was found out wrong, and then I thought, well, this is the best way, and then I found out wrong. It's really easy with education and parenting, and I'm sure you've heard this before, where there's always someone telling you how you should do it. And how you should do it is different for everybody, and it's different every few months. It changes. It's possible that in a year or two, I hope to go back to homeschooling and travel somewhere else. And hopefully that'll be the right thing for us, and he'll thrive in that environment. It's just shocking how kids thrive in different environments at different times. And I still marvel at that.
Yeah.
Before we go on, let's listen to this message.
Recently, the Luminous Mind became an affiliate for EduSense, which offers tremendous discounts on educational supplies. I personally use EduSense to purchase our family supplies because of their great prices, responsive shipping times, and best of all, the chance to earn EduBucks, which I use towards future purchases. Who doesn't love a great deal within a deal? To get a 90% savings on your EduSense materials, go to theluminousmind.net and click on the sponsor page to find the affiliate link. Start using EduSense to illuminate your educational experience. Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Jason Jenkins and an epic education. And maybe as parents, we need to trust that intuition that we feel and to listen to our students, right? Not to think that this is the best way and I'm the parent, so you should listen to me about that.
Right. Yes, I agree.
Great.
I agree.
So tell me, with an epic education, do you have any services that maybe you offer, or maybe give us some testimonials? Let's talk about some of the success that we've seen instead of all the challenges.
Okay, sure. Well, the services I provide, I'm a freelance writer and editor. I work with clients like Nikon. I've been Nikon and Bridgestone, a lot of different Japanese companies that I met while I was there. I also do a lot of freelance editing and freelance writing. I work for the Japan Times and CNN, Bon Appetit magazine. I'm trying to work more with turning the blog into some interesting services. I have an ebook called Tokyo with Children, which is sort of just a travel guide for families who are visiting Tokyo. And I'll be hopefully having an app out in the next few weeks. And then if the app is successful, then I'll be able to turn that into quite a number of apps, actually, because once our system is in place, we'll be able to do that with others. I guess what else, as far as services go, I'm going to be doing some things to the blog and to the podcast. Well, actually, you mentioned the podcast. I have my own podcast called Epic Education Radio, where I interview traveling families like my own, and I'll be expanding that into some other topics and areas soon, and then hopefully trying to take the information that I've been gleaning there and share it with a wider audience.
Well, and it helps probably as a writer, too, to hear other people's stories so that you can,
absolutely,
as an inspiration. Awesome. Tell me maybe some successful things that you've seen with the travel and then with your website and podcast.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, we talked a lot about the challenges, and I didn't mean to hammer on those so much, but I feel that sometimes a lot of these family travel blogs tend to just go, just buy a ticket, just go. It's more complicated than that, but it is completely worth it. All of these challenges that I've talked about, I wouldn't take them away for anything. For one, actually, let me back up and just say when I was actually one of the earlier interviews I was doing with another traveling family, when I asked him what he wanted, he basically put something that resonated with me, and that I think is the biggest sort of insight and benefit that we've had. When I asked him what he wanted, he said, "All I want is resourceful kids," and that really, really hit the nail on the head for me. Our kids are incredibly resourceful now. They know, and what I mean by resourceful is that they know what they know. They know a lot of what they don't know, and then I want them to be able to use those to leverage to get what they want. That's what we want in life, right? Is that it's not just degrees, it's not just passing a test. It's being able to say, I want this in my life, this is what I know now. This is what I don't know. All right, what do I need to do to get that?
Yeah. And putting them in unique experiences that are maybe outside of their element that maybe bring up more challenges than they would have if they were in a regimented area. It helps with that resourcefulness. Do you feel then?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Our kids are much more resourceful, but they're also much more confident and sure of themselves in a much greater number of situations. They can hold a conversation with a 60-year-old woman or a 20-year-old backpacker or a toddler because of just the social groups that they've been in. They feel comfortable and more sure of themselves in a lot of different situations. There's so many benefits, and the fact that they were able to sort of just kind of enter school cold in another language 3 years later and be thriving kind of still blows me away, to be honest.
Yeah, it does talk about that resourcefulness, huh?
Yes, indeed. It's just one of those things where they handle their money well. They have learned to make their own money. Or I should say they're still in the process of learning to make their own money, but they're able to sort of navigate the world in a much more confident way that I think a lot of kids are sort of coddled a bit more and are not capable of walking down the street on their own. And they're not Indiana Jones or anything, but they're definitely more confident in new situations and able to sort of figure out what they want to do, and at the same time are able to sort of express their needs to us in a way that they were not able to do several years ago.
Yeah. Well, and when we stay in one area and we see that one view, it does make us scared because sometimes we tend to think that everyone outside of our little world is evil or they're going to hurt us or something like that. And when you have an opportunity to travel around and say, oh, well, there's genuinely nice people everywhere you go,
absolutely.
It does help with the confidence.
Well, sure. A great example of that is, our kids, like I said, they grew up in a homogenous society in Japan. And when I had friends of different races come to visit, they were a little uncomfortable because they had never met a Nigerian guy before. They had never met a Nepalese guy before. And that was one of the reasons why I thought, well, we got to get out of here just to kind of travel a bit. And now our kids are not only more comfortable in their own skin as a mixed race child. My wife is Japanese, if I hadn't said that before, but they're also more comfortable with people of lots of different backgrounds. We spent over a year in Malaysia, living in Malaysia, which is a Muslim country, and they had Muslim friends, they had Hindu friends, they had if your listeners aren't familiar, Malaysia is a very eclectic country. There's a large Sri Lankan population who are mostly Hindu. The country itself is Muslim with mosques, and then there's also Chinese Malay population that's Buddhist. And then there's large Christian populations and no religion populations, all of those kinds of things, sort of a hodgepodge. And I think that was really good for them.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, it was good for all of us. I think in the States, a lot of people, they hear the word Muslim and you know what the headlines say,
yeah.
right? Muslim is a terrorist. My son was the one non-Malay kid on his soccer team, and they embraced us. They involved us in all of the sort of activities. There was no animosity. There was only warmth and welcome. And I think that was an important element of our education, is just the sort of relating
building.
to other people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Great. So tell me, have you met any mentors, or do you have any mentors that you feel have made a significant difference in your life? Or you could tell us maybe what you have learned from mentoring other people, either through your Epic education or your blog.
Well, I think I'm still early in the mentoring stage, and so I'll leave myself out of the equation. I think it's a little better to be more grateful and show some gratitude to others. I guess when I started researching about doing this sort of life of travel, there was one particular sort of family travel blogger that I turn to often, and her name is Jennifer Miller. Her family has a website, I think it's called the EdVenture Project, like education adventure, EdVenture Project. And she just sort of, her words sort of rang true to me in the way that was meaningful as far as she had homeschooled all her kids, but she also felt that it was really up to each individual. I've kept thinking about her over the last year because what I liked about her was that she didn't speak with a certainty that makes me feel a little suspicious sometimes. So I think anybody who's really certain of something sometimes hasn't really looked at all the angles. And I really look to Jennifer Miller. I don't know her. I just have read her stuff and have felt that. I guess I've also gone back a little to my father, to be honest. My father is a Methodist minister in Atlanta. I'm not necessarily that religious myself, but my dad has really kind of walked the walk over the years, and watching him, I've gone back to thinking, well, what would my dad do in this kind of situation? So I've sort of looked to those people to sort of think about how I should sort of lead my life.
Yeah. Well, and when we feel like nobody's gone through those challenges, that's why I kind of like to talk about challenges. We don't really feel that maybe they're not authentic, because we got to know everyone's struggling somewhere. When we finally find somebody who's willing to admit that maybe it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it, we feel a little bit more connected to them.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Rebecca. That it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it is the message that I would certainly want to relay. In the sort of, if you follow a lot of people in social media or in blogs or whatever in the travel sphere and in the family travel sphere, you get those Instagram pictures with the quotes on them about this or that. It all looks wonderful. And it is wonderful, but I overcompensate here with the challenges because I don't think enough people talk about them. And you need the challenges to realize the triumphs. And I want people to know, if anybody's considering this, it isn't easy, but I am so glad that we left, on this journey 3 years ago, because I feel closer to my kids. I haven't even talked about the relationship with my wife, which has dramatically changed.
You're no longer single parents, right?
Well, exactly.
Tag teaming.
And a lot of our problems, and we were having a lot of marriage problems in those in 2012, 2013, and maybe even before that. And a big part of that was just time. I realize now, I thought it was more complicated than that, but it wasn't. It was just time. We argued over stuff because we hadn't had time to discuss it. We hadn't had time to, lay on the couch together. We're not sitting in bed eating bonbons, but we have time to actually talk about things. Before, because we were just sort of passing in the night, a lot of our arguments were happening because, something would happen and say, I thought you were going to do that. No, you said you were going to do that. No, I remember. It was all of that sort of stuff because nothing was covered. Just the fact that we are around each other more, we're able to work things out, or we're able to sort of discuss things and get things going. And so the relationship between my wife and I has improved 100 times over. I mean, I loved her back then, but we drove each other crazy. We wanted to strangle each other. We just want to strangle each other a whole lot less now.
Well, yeah, definitely.
That's a joke.
No, it definitely, I mean, when you're not around somebody, you definitely don't have like the same life goals, and, you become two different people and not growing together through the challenges. You're each having your own individual challenges, but not working through them together. So
sure. Well, we feel like a team now.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I felt like we were 4 roommates, and now we feel like a team. I can look at my wife this way, or when I stand up to do this, or when we get off an airplane, we know how to react to each other a lot better. I mean, we're not some superhuman James Bond group or anything. We still argue and we stumble and we drop stuff and we slip and fall, but I feel like we're a team in a way that we just weren't 3 years ago.
Yeah. Once again, when you're put in different situations, you have to group together, to survive.
Yeah, and you have to adapt, and you have to lean on each other, and that's been a big part of the last few years.
That's great. Well, and talking about life goals or different life goals, do you have any maybe long-term goals? You talked about maybe a little bit more travel and stuff, but tell us what you're hoping to see down in the future.
That's a good question. It's been something we've been thinking about lately because our kids are getting older. My son's 13, which means, within 5 years, he will be out of, whatever the conventional school age time. What will he want to do with his life then? Where will we be then? I guess a lot of our, I don't think about it too deeply. It's not more of who will I be? It's just where will I be at that time? Our our sort of residency situation here in Spain, as you and your listeners may know, Americans, non-EU citizens can't just stay in the European Union as long as they want. We have a specific kind of visa, which is called a non-lucrative visa, which is a whole other story. But we can basically stay in the country maximum of 5 years, and then we'd have to make another decision. So we have to kind of figure out if we're going to be here that long, or if we're going to explore somewhere else. I'd still like to see some of Latin America. I'd like to get a little experience in South America, Central America, but it also kind of depends on what will make the family happy. I'm hoping to expand some ideas for income from the web that I'm working on now. More than anything, I just really want to expand the podcast and the blog to help other families who are thinking about doing this, whether you want to live indefinitely in a life of travel like we're doing, or if you just want to, you want to take a gap year, or you just want to spend the summer in Europe or in Mexico or something. I want people to realize that it is possible. In most situations, it is possible, and it's worth it to travel with your kids. Meaningful travel, not just going to Disneyland or going to a resort, even though those are nice as well. But, meaningful travel, meaningful family travel is a worthwhile pursuit.
Yeah.
So I hope to share that message.
Well, and you don't have to be living all over the world to consider yourself a world schooling type family.
Not at all.
Yeah. You can use even their weekend travel or whatever to make it that meaningful, right? Different than necessarily just going to Disneyland or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you said that. You don't have to go to exotic locations to have meaningful travel. It's more of being together and learning together, but don't make everything into a classroom lecture. It's just more of exploring. It's inciting curiosity, really. It's being curious together. How about that? It's just sort of group curiosity. I think that sort of curiosity needs to be something that's shared between family members.
Yeah.
And so wherever you go, if you do some things together in a meaningful way, and like I said, it's not that I have a problem with resorts or with amusement parks, but what I mean is we're not just traveling to just entertain ourselves. Travel can be more than entertainment, and I hope people experience that for themselves if they want to.
Yeah, well, we talked about the challenges, putting yourself in difficult situations. That's kind of the point of, I guess, what I feel like, what I'm getting out of what you're talking about with meaningful travel. You talked about some of those unschooling kids that maybe had a little bit of an entitlement attitude. Whatever they wanted or thought kind of revolved around them, but those challenges.
Well, I guess, sure. The challenges, I think, if I can expand on that, it's more of this idea, and one of the big phrases in my family is figure it out. When my kids say, Dad, how much can I put in this suitcase? Figure it out. Dad, where is this? Figure it out. And it kind of ties in with the resourcefulness, right?
Yeah.
Meaningful travel is learning along the way, spending time together, learning about each other, but it's also figuring something out. When I mean entertainment, sometimes when you go to a resort, it's great to relax. It's great to have everything sorted out for you. It's great to do this, but sometimes the meaning comes from looking at a map and going, where the hell are we? How do we get out of here? Where's the bus station? And it may not seem like it at that very moment, but those moments are the things you remember later when you hand the map to your daughter and say, all right, where do we need to go? Where do you think we need to go? And you figure it out together. Or, those kinds of things, is just sort of solving problems together, I think are some of the best memories we've had.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, and we talked about your kind of philosophy of, you were hoping that maybe when you offered the challenges to people that maybe it's not easy, but it's worth it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. So we were talking about it's not easy, but it's worth it. Do you feel like that's the legacy you want to leave? Or is there maybe something else that you're hoping to do with your work that you'll be remembered by with the legacy?
Oh, legacy is
Yeah.
such a heavy word, Rebecca.
I love it though,
guess-
because it really like adds purpose to your life, of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you're right. I need to probably think about that a little more, because I guess that's what I would say. Yeah, but see, the thing is that that can be expanded to just about anything, can't it?
Yeah.
It's not just travel. When it is easy, it's often not memorable. When there is a challenge to it, there's an intrinsic value added to it. And so sure, I'll just double down on that one for the sake of argument, and I would say, yeah, sure, that's my legacy, is that if it ain't easy, it ain't worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely,
Or if it is easy, it ain't worth it.
yeah, it creates that growth that we're all hoping to have down the road. So that's awesome. Before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words for our listeners? And then give us your contact information, how we can get in touch with you.
Okay. Well, let's see. You actually had asked in an earlier email about books, so I'll just go ahead and list
yeah, go ahead and do that.
just three off that I think are well worth checking out. There's a book called Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. It's a classic as far as just long-term travel, and I think it applies to college students and grandpas and family travelers. There's also probably my favorite book, and the one I've gifted the most to the most people, and the one that I return to often. It's called The War of Art. And it's by Stephen Pressfield, and I guess it would be kind of thrown into a self-help category, but I bristle at that category. The War of Art is all about sort of figuring out your motivations and sort of resistance to creativity. And then a book that I'm just about finishing right now is called The Art of Learning, and it's by Josh Waitzkin, who was a chess grand champion, and then started studying Tai Chi and became a push hands, which is a Tai Chi championship, became a world champion in push hands Tai Chi. And he sort of compares martial arts and chess in a very interesting way that applies to anyone trying to learn or alter their behavior in a certain way. So for my contact information, my website is An Epic Education, and that's www.anepiceducation.com, and I have a podcast that is called Epic Education Radio, and I'm about 40 episodes in, and I interview families like mine that have taken their kids traveling or have made travel an important part of their life. Some people have moved abroad. Some people have taken a gap year. Some people are still traveling after years like us. I just sort of break down their habits, what they carry with them, what they've learned, how they educate, how they manage money, those kinds of things. Basically, because I'm trying to show people how to do it. I think there's lots of people that tell you why you should travel with kids. I want to kind of help you with the how part.
Yeah, it's
And
definitely
so
an art to it, correct?
Indeed. But that's the key, is that it's different for every family. And so I'm trying to expose as many resources that people use, tools they use, things they carry with them, strategies they use, so that people can sort of pick and choose and figure out what will work for them.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. It's been super fun to have you on our podcast and talk to you about your mission in life, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Jason Jenkins, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and get our new monthly newsletter. Then check out our services tab to see how we can continue to assist you, our fire starters. Also, to help us continue production of inspiring content, go to the sponsor tab at theluminousmind.net for more information on sponsorship and affiliate programs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and now Instagram. Get our free audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider these easy ways. Tell your friends about us, leave us a review, share our content. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.